Hello, our names are Daniel Canales and Rebecca Henson, and we are presenting our creative presentation titled To Report or Not. Many caring mothers are often overly concerned with their children's safety, health, and happiness. However, worrying about the condition of their children sometimes causes anxiety. After all, every mother wants the best for her children. But where is the line drawn between a caring mother and a mother who can harm her child? When should healthcare professionals report?
The patient was born in 1991. When she was a baby, her mother claimed her daughter had sleep apnea. When the patient was 8 years old, her mother described her as suffering from leukemia and muscular dystrophy. Her mother demanded that the patient required a wheelchair and feeding tube. The patient's medical conditions would include seizures, asthma, hearing difficulties, and visual impairments. Due to her mother's actions, the patient was prescribed many medications and had to sleep using a breathing machine. She also went through multiple surgeries, including procedures on her eyes and removal of her salivary glands. When the patient's teeth eventually rotted, they were pulled out. Yet the truth was that the patient could walk, didn't need a feeding tube, and did not have cancer.
In 2008, the patient and her mother moved into a new home in Springfield, Missouri that was built by Habitat for Humanity. The patient and her mother received benefits that included charity-sponsored visits to concerts and Disney World. All along, the mother continued to bask in the attention she received for being a devoted caretaker. As the patient grew older, her mother began to lie about her age, going so far as to alter the dates on the patient's birth certificate to make her daughter seem younger.
Medical tests often showed inconclusive or contradictory results regarding the patient's diagnoses, but the mother would stop seeing any doctors who questioned her daughter's ailments. Many caregivers also went along with what the mother wanted. The mother had some nurses training so she could accurately describe symptoms and sometimes gave the patient medication to mimic certain conditions. The mother was also charming and seemed devoted to her daughter. When the patient was old enough to talk, the mother instructed her not to volunteer information during their appointments. She was always the one relating the patient's fake medical history. She also claimed that Hurricane Katrina had washed away all of the patient's medical records.
The case is that of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Her mother, Dee Dee, started diagnosing Gypsy with a variety of illnesses when she was 3 months old, which included sleep apnea, epilepsy, cancer, muscular dystrophy, and ear and eye problems. In reality, Gypsy was perfectly healthy, but Dee Dee was convinced her daughter was sick. Her behavior points to Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is psychological disorder where a person makes up or exaggerates medical symptoms of a child in their care in order to gain attention and sympathy. Caregiver fabricated illness, CFI, previously known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, MSBP, is a psychiatric disease in which a person induces intentional harm to another to gain personal benefit from the treatment process. This disease is emerging and becoming more prevalent in children and is now considered a
mother controlled everything I did. I was forced to use a wheelchair. She started telling people that I had cancer. But none of it was true. There was also a lot of emotional and physical abuse. I started to feel like it was either her or me.
Dee Dee Blanchard's death was violent.
And that's when I heard her calling my name. Gypsy, help me.
Her daughter, Gypsy Blanchard, and her boyfriend are now jailed on first-degree murder.
I played a part in asking him to commit the murder. That is why I'm in prison. I've had 6 years to feel those emotions. And there's things that I've kept so private.
The reason why I want to talk about it now is because I want to be free of all these disturbing secrets.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Canales, and I am here today with breaking news story of a woman who has suffered of the condition known as Munchausen by proxy. The story is of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and the grueling conditions she was put in by her mother. Please join us today as we uncover the story of Gypsy. Gypsy, I just want to say thank you so much for being with us today. My first question for you, to start it off, for those of you that aren't aware of the story, how do you compare life in prison and life with your mother?
I think prison was a better place for me because I was finally able to discover who I am. I discovered my self worth. This was probably the most important thing. I participated in classes. I got the chance to associate with other adults my own age and to learn from them and to grow.
Thank you, Gypsy. So now, growing up, you didn't really have much of a childhood when it came to interacting with other people, especially your age. So, what was it like? Did you have any regular interactions with people in your age group before prison?
No, my mother lied to me about my age. When I was 24, my mother was telling people I was 12. She was always giving different ages to different people. I was never sure how old I was exactly until after her death.
Got it. Okay. And what was your experience like in prison? What kind of things did you learn to do in prison that you couldn't do before?
In prison, I was able to dive into my education. I came into prison with a second grade education. In prison, I was able to study and build my vocabulary. I got to watch TV where I would watch many different educational shows. Relationships I find particularly interesting. The ins and outs, the ups and downs of relationships. I got to learn a lot about who I am as well.
All right, that's really amazing that you got to do a deep dive in your education, and prison allowed you to really focus on the things that you were most interested in. What about in the week since you've been released from prison? I know that's been a much shorter period of time, but there are things that you've learned this week. What are some examples of the things that you have learned now being out of prison?
I cooked my first meal with my husband, he's soon to be ex-husband, but it was a memorable event. I couldn't believe I did it. I made a few mistakes, but it was okay, and I grew from that. And it is something that I will never forget. I first met my husband, Ryan Scott Anderson, in 2020 during COVID. He began writing to me and sending pictures. I liked that he was also from Louisiana, like me, and I kept thinking how I could have known him, and we would talk on the phone. I liked how he would always make me laugh. And one night I was calling him, and he had forgotten his phone at home, and he went all the way back home to get his phone so he could take my call, and that made me see how much he cared. It just didn't work out after, though, I was released. I have continued to grow. I want my freedom. The love we shared is not enough. We have grown apart and choose to divorce.
All right, that's awesome, Gypsy. That's so great that you got to start to cook and, started to explore some of your interests. So now that you are released from prison, what are some goals for yourself? What are some things that you'd like to accomplish given that you've lived this experience? What would you tell others?
I want to help better educate doctors on Munchausen by proxy syndrome. Mothers have reached out to me expressing how they nearly lost their children due to a false diagnosis from a doctor or psychologist. Yet I myself was failed by the system. I simply slipped through the cracks in every system meant to prevent things like this from happening. I want to help find a balance. I want to use my experience to help make a change. My advice is to please tell someone, anyone. It doesn't have to be someone close to you. Just tell anyone. Even if you don't think they will believe you, just tell them. If you have someone close to you, even better, tell them. It's just important to remember you're not alone, and it is a big world full of people you can tell. I share my story as a cautionary tale, as a warning. It does not have to be this way. What if what I chose to do was the wrong choice? I did things the wrong way.
Yeah, that's a great point, Gypsy, for those in the audience who are healthcare professionals and have never came across, this topic. It's great advice for you. What about advice for someone who suspects that somebody they know is a victim? What advice would you have to give to them?
If you suspect it, you should report it. If you suspect something is not right with someone and their situation, you should report it. So many people told me after that happened how they had a feeling things were not right, but they ignored it. She never wanted me to find love or to be happy. My mother pretended to put spells on me and said I would never find love or happiness. She held me prisoner. I was trapped. I tried escaping once and she caught me. And when I came home, she chained me to her for 2 weeks and starved me. After that, she would hit me and kick me, and she bought a gun. I was afraid of my mother, but I loved my mother. The abuse I suffered at her hand was immeasurable, and I could not escape her. And my punishment is that I have to live with what I did every day of my life, and I cannot take it back. But I did not see another way out. I thought I was never going to be free, and I have to live with that forever.
The story of Dee Dee Blanchard's Munchausen syndrome by proxy is heartbreaking. As mentioned in our video, a thorough clinical examination of the child and a qualified analysis of the family's psychosocial relationship should be conducted and documented. The ethical issues to consider when making decisions regarding cases of suspected MSBP mainly concern the medical options that best protect the child's welfare. The first criterion, namely the child's best interest, can be applied on the grounds of the two bioethical principles of beneficence and non-maleficence. The second criterion is founded on one of the classical principles of bioethics, autonomy relation to decisions made by parents, and not by the child on whose behalf they act. Ultimately, healthcare providers must report any suspected harm or abuse regardless of whether there is hard evidence at the time of the report.
These are our references.
Thank you.